Hello, everyone. I am Meg. I am Meg from Ministry Mondays with Meg, but this is a bonus episode. I'm also here representing Judson Press, and today I have the honor of introducing you to Reverend Joy Freeman, who is a chaplain, and I'm going to let her actually tell her own story, tell everybody who doesn't know her a little bit about herself, and what brings you here, and floor is yours.
All right. Thanks so much, Meg. Like Meg said, I'm a board certified chaplain. I'm board certified through the Association of Professional Chaplains. I am working on my 19th year of ministry as a staff chaplain at North Kansas City Hospital. I have been in chaplaincy since my residency in 2001, so you all can do the math. Numbers are not my strong suit. That's why I went into chaplaincy. In my career there, I have kind of become a Jill of all trades in chaplaincy. Spent 10 years doing exclusively critical care chaplaincy until I finally had to pull out because that was just really intense. Moved back into being what I call more of a generalist, covering whatever's needed in terms of spiritual care of our patients, families, and staff. Staff care is probably the passion of my heart, especially having gone through the last 2.5+ years of COVID and carrying through some amazing nurses and doctors through that, as well as respiratory therapists and physical OT, you name it at the hospital. In terms of a discipline, I'm helping care for them. I also am a primary chaplain to our maternity unit. And that came about in some interesting ways. And right when I became a chaplain to the maternity unit is also when I began my journey shortly after that as a bereaved mother. In 2010, we found out that our second child had multiple congenital anomalies that was not going to have hope be able to survive outside of the womb. As a hospital chaplain, my husband is also a healthcare professional. We value highly the idea of quality over quantity of life. And we value that our child not have any kind of pain and suffering. And so at that time, we made a very difficult decision to, at 14 weeks of gestation, to return hope back to God and have what is called a medically necessary termination of a pregnancy. I kept my story secret for a very long time because this is the idea of ending a pregnancy is very emotionally and politically fraught. We know this from the age that we are living in right now. There was a very small circle of our family and friends that really knew what had happened and the decision we made because we were emotionally raw. We were emotionally fragile. We couldn't handle all of the extra that would come with judgment and people maybe not understanding. I came back to work on the maternity unit, and as nurses began to ask how I was doing, what happened, I began to share my story in bits and pieces. And I also became an active member of our maternity bereavement team. This is the team that helps take care of our families that come in and lose an early pregnancy. I hate the term loss because we know exactly what happened to it. Who have a stillbirth, who have a child die in utero, who have a child die shortly after birth. It's pregnancy, loss, and infant death. And that is what we take care of as the team. A lot of what the book, Still a Mother, talks about is how hard the language is around that we don't have good words to really talk about the death of our babies at any kind of death that is not outside of the womb. And so through all of that, so that's kind of, I began to share my story a little bit more. And through my work with the bereavement team, I had an opportunity to a panel of nurses, nursing students, a group of nursing students as part of a panel, share my story in depth, not as a chaplain, but as a bereaved mom. And the response I got from that, and people saying, Joy, the world needs to hear your story, got me starting tiptoeing around finding places and ways to begin to tell Hope's story and to tell our family's story and journey through this. That is in that time that I met Reverend Tabitha Johnson, my co-editor. At the time, we were actually co-chaplains at North Kansas City Hospital, shared an office space, had some amazing conversations. Still a Mother is actually her brainchild. And she was the one who encouraged me to come alongside of her and put together and pitch the idea of Still a Mother, which is the stories of 7 clergy women who have experienced some kind of perinatal loss infant death. We cover the stories of women who have had multiple early first trimester miscarriages. We have the stories of women who have had stillbirths in the second trimester. We have stories of women who made it almost a full term and gave birth to a stillborn child in the third trimester. We have the story of a woman whose son lived for 7 months and died of SIDS. And we also have my story of a medically necessary termination. And in one of our women's stories is also wrapped up in that, the story of a chosen termination as a teenager. We decided if we were going to do this authentically, we needed to tell all of the stories. And part of the reason we wanted to do this is Tabitha and I, when we were going through our own losses, we could not find books that really addressed our own feelings. We didn't resonate with the rainbow babies and God makes all of this for good. That stuff didn't resonate with us because we were angry at God. We were questioning, if some of our women questioned if God even exists. Asking the hard questions. For me particularly, why my baby, God? What did I do wrong? And a lot of the literature and things didn't wrestle with those things. It was like, well, I just had enough faith and God got me through this, and it was all kind of warm and fuzzy. And we're like, there's nothing warm and fuzzy about this journey, people. Nothing. Now, for some people, if that was their experience, that's awesome. But we wanted to put something out there that told authentically the harder parts of the journey and to address the theological questioning of God. And who better to do that than clergy women who walked this path and made these journeys? Because if we as clergy women felt this, how much more empowering can it be for the lay woman sitting in our pews to know that all of this that they're doing is okay? And all of what they're feeling is okay.
Yeah, I want to say that even for folks that have not lost a child, this is a helpful book to read, especially as clergy, especially when it talks about that room for grief, that room to be angry at God, because who are we to think that God is not big enough for us to be angry at God, and and it's spot on. As I told you before we started, I am the aunt of Chloe. It was my brother's second daughter, and it doesn't matter that I was just her aunt. You know, there is still grief, and there are still all those feelings that go along with that. And and as having served as a pastor, there's so much grief in ministry, and so I think this book beautifully speaks to so much grief and gives you that place. I think the hardest part about grief is like that, some of that language. And we know that people mean well, that's that's in the book. We know that they mean well, but please don't say that God took my child, my niece, my anything, because God needed another angel.
Oh, I
That,
hate that one.
right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't abide in a God that just, takes kind of thing. What did you find in your grief? What did you find most helpful?
So at the very beginnings of it, we were very fortunate that my parents were able to come out. And you'll have to pardon me, even though it's been,
Yeah.
11, 12, 13 years. Again, I don't do math well right now. Right. There are parts of the story that still are so powerful to me. I get choked up. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate. My parents were able to come out and be with us. They lived out of state at the time, so it took them a little bit to get out here. We were fortunate. July 9th was when we found out that we were going to need to give hope back to God. And then July 12th was when the procedure happened and we gave hope back. So my family was very fortunate to have that very insulated time between July 9 and 11, something around there, before my parents were able to make it out there. And then my oldest was almost 3 at the time. And we were very fortunate for my parents to be able to come out and spend time with us. One of our pastors, who I knew very well, Pastor Ruth Roselle, came out to our house and did that Sunday before we went into the doctor's office for the procedure. I was able to, we created a service. As an American Baptist, that idea of dedicating a baby to God is so important to me. And as clergy, I had created a blessing for my oldest. I had helped craft, all of this that comes along with being a clergy mom, a clergy parent, and all of the framework you put around that. And that was one of the things I looked forward to the most, to being the first gift I got to give my second baby. And I wasn't going to have that opportunity. And so Reverend Ruth, came out to the house, did a combined in utero baby dedication and goodbye service for just us as a family. She brought a rose. Our church had a tradition of, when a new baby is born, a rose is put on the organ. And I was like, my hope isn't going to get that. Well, my hope, it may not have been up on the organ, but my hope still got the rose. And I created, my oldest got a Celtic blessing that I had found. I created and altered another one I had chosen for hope to fit more of the circumstances. And so being able to do those things for those ritual things were really helpful as I kind of began that process of figuring out how to say goodbye. And I alluded to this earlier, probably the question that was rooted most deeply in my grief was why. What did I do wrong as a woman trying to nurture a life in my womb? And what helped me the most through that was my husband looking at me and telling me over and over and over again, it was not my fault. I was the most conscientious and attentive pregnant woman he knew to everything that I put inside my body. And then words that my mom told me as I was sitting on the floor in my bedroom, just falling apart to pieces. And she sits down next to me, wraps her arms around me, and tells me, God did not cause this to happen to your baby. This is the result of the imperfect world we live in. God is here stepping into the gap to make something amazing out of this. Now, I may have added some other words that weren't hers, but the gist of all of that, that idea of her reminding me what, as a clergy person, I knew, but my grief and my humanness couldn't connect to the really heady work of knowing that. My heart was saying a totally different story. So to have my mom, who I look up to as the type of mom I wanted to be. My dad is also a pastor, but much of my personal spiritual formation, I remember coming from my mom, who was my Sunday school teacher a lot. And I later had deeper conversations with my father, processing stuff. But in those first days, it was those wise words from one of my female icons of motherhood and one of my female spiritual mentors that really put me on that path to being able to crawl up and sit in God's lap as I figured out my way forward. And then telling my story over and over and over again in different ways, in different venues, having people give me the opportunity to share that, which has led me to where I am today. You know, as the author of one of the co-editors and chapter authors of Still a Mother, having opportunities to talk about the book and why we wanted to write the book, sharing my own story, both in formal and informal venues. But even more meaningful than that is my opportunity to be the maternity chaplain. That for the majority of the time, the other chaplains have opportunities to respond and step alongside too, because I can't be there 24/7. But to be able to walk into that woman's room, not only as a chaplain, but also as a bereaved mother. And this is where the two dovetail so beautifully. Chaplaincy has taught me how to utilize my story in a way that it isn't about me, but also in a way that lets that woman who has just had to start processing the reality that she is going to say both hello and goodbye to her preciously wanted baby. And let her know, while it feels like she's a part of a secret society, she is really not, because there are women who are standing up loud and proud and telling our stories and saying you are not alone. And everything you're feeling is normal and valid. And to come alongside grandparents and fathers, and to help parents learn, if there's siblings involved, help parents learn how to walk alongside. That was probably the hardest part of the journey for me, was my oldest, who is referenced as CJ in the book. She grieved too. She was very acutely aware that she was supposed to be a big sister. Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing my own grief work while trying to help my almost 3-year-old do her grief work. And here's the thing about children's grief. As CJ got to understand at different developmental levels, a deeper understanding of what Hope's death and our family story really was, there were elements of re-grieving it at that new level of understanding. So I had to enter back into that grief over and over and over again. And that's where that community around me that understood that there is no timeline to this, that there's going to be some years I handle my anniversaries, I hope anniversary beautifully. And there's going to be other years where I am a hot mess. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am grateful for people like you that come and tell your story over and over, and that it's not just a story, that it's still real and it's still raw, and yeah, while the grief changes, it never goes away.
Yeah.
And that we name those things, and that we say that it's okay to talk about those things, because for so long women have had to be silent about things like that. So
and that's one of the reasons why we really say this is a book for everybody. Both for families, people who are doing this grief journey from whatever relationship you had with that precious child, but also for those who maybe haven't had any personal experience with this, but just want to know how to do better. Because one of, I think, the things that's beautiful about this book is at the end of each chapter, we actually list out very specific takeaways of things to know and remember about journeying alongside a woman and family who has that specific kind of story. And then at the end, we have some more general resources. And that's, I think, what's so beautiful and unique about this book. It's not just our stories, but it's us saying, okay, now here's how you can concretely use our story to help journey alongside. Here are the core truths. And here's what not to say.
Exactly. Yes. Then that's an important part of it all. So I ask you the question that I ask everyone, and that's about joy. Yes, you are joy, but where do you find your joy in your ministry?
For me, I specifically, I'll talk specifically about working and ministering to bereaved families, and then I'll expand it out. With my maternity bereavement families, my joy comes when I share with them, hi, I'm Joy. I'm one of the spiritual caregivers here, stopping in just to check in you. I know this is hard, but I'm also here as a bereaved mom, not because it's about me, but because we need to know that we're not alone. And to see the breath exhale. And that I'm safe. It seems odd maybe that I take great joy in that, but creating that safe space for people to let whatever is going on hang out is probably where I find my deepest contentment in my work as a chaplain. And that carries to any situation. It's when I make that connection and they feel comfortable going deep with me. And sometimes that going deep literally means just sitting down in the middle of a trauma room floor next to a family member who is collapsed and is sobbing uncontrollably and needs an anchor to hold on to. I'm not very afraid of germs anymore.
Right. Well, I am grateful for you, for your ministry. Grateful for you and the brave women that have told their story. So just a couple of housekeeping notes for people who are watching is Joy's going to join us at Space for Grace at the Spiritual Caregivers Conference. She will be there attending.
Mhm.
So please feel free to join us and connect with her. If you don't own the book, again, I highly recommend it. You can get it at judsonpress.com. You can also get it at Amazon. I checked; they're in both places. So, and it's not a long read, but there's a lot there to unpack, and really is important for people to read, especially those serving in ministry and those who just want to understand it a little more. So, Joy, I am grateful again for you for spending some time with me today and sharing your story with me, with others. Keep doing the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yes.
In Kansas. So we thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time. So.